Questions orales. All questions. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Conservatives have an excellent tax to axe a tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost after 8 years.
Carbon tax are not worth the cost after 8 long years. The Parliamentary Budget Officer confirms that in every single province, Canadians pay far more in taxes than they get back in rebates, a tax that will go up 23%. Today, Common Sense Conservatives are calling for the Prime Minister to grant his caucus a free vote on our motion to spike the hike.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, 8 out of 10 families throughout the country where we've put a federal price on pollution receive more money from it than they pay into it. What the Leader of the Opposition is proposing is to remove not only checks that are delivered for families that help with groceries, with rent, with the impact of climate change, but they are also doing nothing to fight climate change, to build a stronger future. We are here to help Canadians with checks. We are here to fight against climate change. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Understand that after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. And they're right. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, this Prime Minister's carbon tax will cost the average Nova Scotia family $1,500. That's why the Nova Scotia Legislature voted unanimously, Liberals, Conservatives and NDP, to call on federal MPs representing the province to vote with the Common Sense Conservatives to spike the hike. Will he allow a free vote so Nova Scotians can vote for their constituents rather than the party boss?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, a family of 4 in Nova Scotia gets about $824 back in the year for the price on pollution. The Canadian carbon rebate delivers more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country. The Leader of the Opposition wants to take away those Canada carbon rebate checks from Canadian families, where 8 out of 10 families do better, even with the price on pollution. It's a way of fighting climate change, of building a safer, more prosperous future, and putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians, something he wants to take away.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister has finally done something helpful when it comes to math. He says that his rebate for Nova Scotians is $850. Well, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that the cost is $1,500 for the average Nova Scotia family. So he wants to take away $1,500 from the average Nova Scotia family in carbon taxes and give back only $850. Everybody knows that the carbon tax is just like him, not worth the cost. Will he allow a free vote?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition wants to take away the Canada carbon rebate checks that land in Nova Scotians' mailboxes, but in the pockets of families right across the country where the price on pollution is in place, because 8 out of 10 of them do better with the price on pollution and the Canada carbon rebate than they would. He wants to take away those checks from Canadians, and he wants to do far less to fight against the climate change impacts the Canadians are feeling from coast to coast to coast. No plan for the future, no money for Canadians.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the tax revolt has spread to Ontario, where now the Liberal leader of the provincial party has flip-flopped and says that she too is against the Prime Minister's carbon tax. Maybe that's because she read the Parliamentary Budget Officer report showing Ontarians will pay $1,674. That's more than $600 more than the rebate in that province. So, will the Prime Minister allow his Ontario MPs to have a free vote on our common sense Conservative motion to spike the hike?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, families in Ontario are facing higher prices for groceries, higher costs for rent, and we are delivering a Canada Carbon rebate that leaves them better off. 8 out of 10 Canadian families across the country do more money in their pockets with the Canada Carbon rebate than the price on pollution costs them. At the same time, the price on pollution is bringing down carbon emissions, preparing a cleaner economy of the future, and putting more money back in Canadians' pockets. The Conservatives want to take away the Canada Carbon rebate checks. We're going to continue to support families on affordability and fighting climate change.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Right from the Parliamentary Budget Officer's numbers, he says $1,674 is the cost to the average Ontario family, and the rebate is only $1,047. So Ontarians are paying more than they get back, just like British Columbians, where the NDP government is administering the federally mandated carbon tax. And according to the Vancouver Sun today, the budget presented by the NDP in that province says the carbon tax will raise $9 billion over 3 years and only pay back $3 billion. Mr. Speaker, that's a net nearly $6 billion net carbon tax cost. Will he allow BC MPs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for Canadians watching politics and watching this question period, for reporters up in the gallery, or anyone who wants to see a concrete example of the fact that the leader of the official opposition doesn't care about facts, doesn't care about evidence, doesn't care about how the Federation works. He just wants to make clever arguments to score partisan points. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that British Columbia price on pollution has been there since 2008 and will continue to be administered by British Columbia, not the federal government.
Well done.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the government
Order. Order. Je vais inviter le...
I would like to invite the leader of the Bloc Québécois to restart his sentence, his question. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the government in Canada are loving the fiscal imbalance. The federal government receives more in tax than what its jurisdictions are asking for, and provinces and Quebec are receiving less than their just part. Will the government and does the Prime Minister and the government recognise that Quebec's extreme deficit is fabricated by the federal government of Canada? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in this federation, that is Canada, the federal government is here to work with provincial governments to deliver what Canadians need from coast to coast to coast. We have made record investments in healthcare, in dental care, in transfers to provinces to deliver the services that they need. I understand that the leader of the Bloc Québécois wants to make this a debate on Quebec's sovereignty, but the reality of the matter is that we are working very well together, and we will continue to make sure that all Canadians from coast to coast to coast prosper. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. We won't make it a debate, but he owes $6 billion to Quebec when it comes to healthcare. $1 billion for welcoming refugees. That's $7 billion total on an $11 billion deficit. Everyone is against him, and he is throttling and strangling Quebec. Is he using that money to try and force Quebec to follow the federal government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, you will understand that when I talk to Quebec, when I work with Quebecers, I'm working with them. I'm not working with the Bloc Québécois. I'm working with the Prime Minister of Quebec, the Premier of Quebec, rather. We had an excellent discussion on healthcare, on immigration, on economic growth. We won't always agree on everything, of course, but we do agree on the need to work together in a constructive way without looking for petty squabbles, which is what the Bloc Québécois seeks to do every single day.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
After decades of Liberal and Conservative failure, Indigenous communities continue to live in overcrowded homes that are in desperate need of repair. The Liberals promised to make a major step forward to improving this by 2030, but today's Auditor General report makes it clear that the Liberals will break yet another promise to Indigenous people. So will the Liberal government stop spending millions of dollars on private consultants and make this serious issue a priority in the upcoming budget?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we thank the Auditor General for her report and are, of course, carefully reviewing all of her recommendations to pursue a path forward that effectively addresses those concerns. In regards to Indigenous cooperation and partnerships, whether it's on housing or policing, consultation is at the heart of everything we do. We're committed to working in partnership with First Nations to advance these priorities.
Thanks for your donation.
L'Honourable Chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. My apologies. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Indigenous communities are living in overcrowded housing units that are in desperate need of repair. The Auditor General's report released today shows that 80% of housing needs are not being met. The Prime Minister would never allow this kind of thing to happen in Toronto. So why does he have lower standards for Indigenous communities? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that's rightly false, what has just been proffered by the leader of the NDP. We have invested historic amounts to work with Indigenous communities on housing, on services and healthcare, on assistance to help economic prosperity. There's still a lot of work to do, we recognise it, but the progress that we have done on reconciliation and our partnerships with Indigenous peoples will continue, and we would like to thank the Auditor General for her recommendations. We'll continue to work hand in hand with Indigenous communities to deliver.
L'Honourable Chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
April Fool's Day carbon tax hike of 23% will hit Nova Scotians especially hard. The Prime Minister's tax will cost $1,500 for the average Nova Scotia family, far more than they get back in rebates. That's why Nova Scotia's Assembly passed a unanimous motion with all three parties supporting it, calling for federal MPs from that province to vote with Conservatives to spike the hike. One of those MPs is from Kings Hants, the chair of the Agriculture Committee, which has been studying the carbon tax pain for farmers. So the question is for the chair of the Agriculture Committee, will he vote with us to spike the hike?
So, colleagues, of course, questions can be asked of the government regarding administrative issues of the government, and of course to committee chairs. It's important for Canadians to understand, though, that when questions are asked of committee chairs, it has to be regarding stuff that has committee business. That's before the committee right now, and so in consultation, we realize that that isn't the issue that is here before. So I see that the Honourable Minister for Housing is rising on his feet.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And look, what the honourable member is actually suggesting is false. We have real-world data to demonstrate in provinces where the system actually applies, families receive hundreds of dollars more each year than they pay in fuel charges. The Conservatives pretend to care about affordability, yet they oppose measures to put more money in the pockets of families. They pretend to care about affordability, but they oppose measures that protect seniors' pensions. They pretend to care about affordability, but they vote against measures to remove the interest on Canada's student loans. Mr. Speaker, we will do everything we can to make life more affordable, including putting more money in the pockets of families while we fight climate change at the same time.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that parliamentary censorship proves everything you need to know about this and everything else in this government. I asked a question of the member for King's Hands, the chair of the Agriculture Committee, who's now studying the painful impacts of the carbon tax, and the front bench here shut him down, told him to sit down and shut up because they had a better mouthpiece for the PMO who would stand and speak in his stead. Mr. Speaker, the question is for the member for King's Hands, the chair of the Agriculture Committee. His committee studying how the carbon tax hurts farmers. Will he vote to spike the hike?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Speaker, if the honourable member has qualms about the member for King's Hands, I can reassure him he is a champion for his community. He launched a petition recently to stand up to the Conservative government in Nova Scotia for changes to the agricultural sector in his community. Every time the Conservatives ask a question about the environment, it's to find out ways that they can do less. The member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke has suggested flooding in the Ottawa River was a result of regulations that were not in place. The member from Caribou, Prince George, has suggested climate change is not a result of industrial pollution, but of more body heat from a growing population. The member from Red Deer Lacombe visited school kids to say carbon dioxide was plant food. Mr. Speaker, this...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's absolutely right. It is a joke, an April Fool's joke, and the joke is on Canadian taxpayers, especially Nova Scotians, who will have to pay $1,500 in higher carbon taxes after that hike goes ahead. He says that the member for King's Hands is a champion who can't even speak, who's silenced by his own MPs. Will the member...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition has 10 seconds left on the clock.
Will the censored champion break his silence and tell us, will he vote for his constituents to spike the hike, or will he rip them off on April Fool's Day?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Speaker, the Conservatives want to peddle false information to trick Canadians into voting for them. The reality, proven not by projections, but by real-world data, is that people who live in my province receive more money every year from the rebates that they receive than the fuel charge that they pay. Everything the Conservatives do...
Order. The Honourable Minister has 15 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, at every instance the Conservatives have an opportunity to speak in House, they do one of two things: advocate to do less on the environment or to take money from families in my community. I will support neither. We will do whatever we can to put more money in the pockets of families and do the right thing for future generations.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the silent member from King's Hands. He is asked to explain how he's voting for a carbon tax of $1,500 per family that only pays back $963 in rebates. I asked him specifically to stand and answer, but he's been shut down and shut up by his masters in the PMO. So once again, will the chair of the Agriculture Committee and member for King's Hands stand in today and tell us whether he will vote to spike the hike or raise the tax?
members, I will invite all members to please listen to their House Leader and the House Leader teams. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Leader of the Opposition knows full well the rules of this place and knows full well that members on this side are proud and pleased to defend the initiatives and the affordability measures.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, to wait his turn to ask a question before taking the floor. The Honourable Government House Leader has 23 seconds left on the clock.
The Leader knows the rules of this place and knows that on this side of the House, we're pleased and proud to speak to the affordability measures and the things that we're putting in place to make life more affordable for Canadians. But while we're on this theme, I have a question for the member of the Defence Committee from Selkirk Interlake. Why did he sell out the people of Ukraine in voting against the free trade arrangement?
Order. Order. I'll ask the Honourable Government House Leader to please have order in this House. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Kings Hants, Nova Scotia, are learning they don't have a voice in Parliament because he has been silenced. The Prime Minister is terrified that he might stand up and get off script. He knows that the unanimous will of the Nova Scotia legislature, Liberals, Conservatives, and New Democrats, was passed in a motion calling for all of that province's MPs to vote against the hike. So will the member for Kings Hants, who's the chair of the Agriculture Committee, stand up for farmers in his riding and vote with us to spike the hike? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Kings Hants stands up for farmers, stands up for his constituents, stands up for the people of Nova Scotia, and stands up for the people of Canada every single day. On this side of the House, we are incredibly proud to have him as our colleague. And one thing that he knows is the people of Kings Hants do not need cuts, 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 and that is all the Conservatives have to offer them or any single Canadian.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Kings Hants is in the Witness Protection Program today. He can't possibly stand up when his whip waves for him to sit down, which is exactly what happened a moment ago when I asked him a legitimate question as chair of the Agriculture Committee, a committee that's studying the devastating impact of the carbon tax on farmers in his riding and across the country. So for a sixth time, will he come out of the Witness Protection Program and announce whether he will vote for our motion to spike the hike?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives love to talk Canada down. They traffic in fear and falsehood. But on this side of the House, we believe in Canada and we believe in Canadians. And that's why I am so glad to share some good news with the members of this House. And that is the inflation number for February, which came out this morning, 2.8% below expectations, within the Bank of Canada's target range. That is the second month in a row. In January, it was 2.9. Within the target, our plan is working, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Montcalm. In 12 days, Ottawa will cut $1 billion from healthcare if Quebec does not accept conditions that are its own jurisdiction. 12 days when we are talking about sums that Quebec and Ottawa have been agreeing on for over a year. If the federal government's priority were patience, this money would have been transferred a long time ago. But no, in 12 days, it's either the axe or accepted conditions. The federal government is holding sick people hostage with the money they pay in taxes. Why not simply give priority to patients by transferring the money right now without conditions? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a bit odd. It's always the Bloc Québécois who are looking for squabbles. But when I talk to Minister Dubé and the Quebec government, they want to work with a spirit of cooperation with our government to improve the health of all Quebecers. And that is the reason for which there will be an agreement with the province of Quebec before the end of the month, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Jonquière. We could talk about tense intergovernment relations if only there were relations. Instead, the federal government has entered the phase of just saying no. No to unconditional increases in health transfers. No to the right to opt out of dental and medical insurance. No to support the reception of asylum seekers. Finally, the only thing the federal government won't say no to is our tax dollars. But Quebecers are entitled to have their say on what the federal government does with their money. Why is it so difficult to simply respect Quebec's wishes and say yes for once? The Honourable Minister for Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois has become the paragon of no. No to collaboration, no to sharing information, no to dialogue, no to reaching results, no to working for Quebecers. They want things to fail, but that is not the case. We are working well with Quebec. The Minister for Health is doing extraordinary work. Great meetings with his Quebec counterpart. They're not there at the negotiating table. They don't know what's going on. All they want are squabbles. And when it doesn't work, they try again. But that's not the case because we are working together for all Quebecers. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. We might not be in the government, but we've just enumerated a number of budgetary measures. Because it's also no to full immigration powers for Quebec, no to Bill 21 on the secular nature of the state, no to advance requests for medical assistance in dying. It's almost on principle, even when it costs nothing. The federal government simply says no to Quebec. What a contrast. In this week when we are paying tribute to Brian Mulroney, who advocated a federalism of honour and enthusiasm for Quebecers, does the government realise that saying no to everything and saying no all the time is exactly the opposite of the spirit? The Honourable Minister for Health. Mr. Speaker, it's only the Bloc Québécois that says no all the time. The Bloc Québécois is seeking out problems, seeking out squabbles, but for us, we seek out solutions together with Quebec to make sure that information is present in every province and every territory. And I'm eminently proud that we have an agreement with every province and territory so that we can increase the quality of healthcare throughout Canada. That is our objective. We will work in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration. We're not just going to play partisan politics like they want us to.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
Last year in my riding, Colk Farms, a local producer, was forced to pay $62,000 just in carbon tax on his natural gas alone. That's $62,000. And what this Liberal NDP government doesn't understand, because it is so out of touch, is that when Canadians go to the grocery store, they pick up that bill when they go to buy groceries for their families. Canadians are already struggling, and now on April 1st, they're going to face another increase of 23%. Will the Prime Minister spike the hike and axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister.
And, you know, I'd like to say to the member opposite, I want a reminder of the rural top-up coming to the carbon rebate. So a family of four in Alberta is going to see $2,160. A family in my riding is going to see $1,430 when they live in a rural area. My friends, we know what it's like. That's why we're there to help people with the carbon rebate. That's why we're there to help with the child care benefit. That's why we're there to help with housing. We're there to help Canadians, Mr. Speaker, in rural areas as well.
Before I get to the Honourable Member from Lethbridge, I'm going to ask all members, please, to only take the floor when they are recognized by the Speaker to do so. The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
I think what's clear is that the Liberals have a dysfunctional relationship with the truth. You see, Canadians pay more than they actually get back. And so for the average Albertan family, they pay $2,943. Meanwhile, they get back $2,032, which means ultimately they are $1,000 in the hole. That is how much they are having to remit to this government. That is how much this government is pickpocketing from them. Why is this government doing that to Canadians when they are already already struggling to pay their bills, make ends meet, provide for their family.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what's happening on the Conservative side of this House. Maybe it's that they've joined the Ag Chair in the Witness Protection Program when it comes to defending the interests of Albertans and their pensions. Where's the MP for Edmonton Mill Woods? Where's the...
The honourable member from South Shore St. Margaret's, I'm going to ask him and ask all members, please, to allow members to speak for two reasons. One, so that the speaker can hear the question or hear the response. And secondly, is because there are members who do not speak the other official language. And if they're trying to listen in their earphones, they can't hear. So please, I'll ask all members to restrain themselves. The Honourable Minister has 20 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, where are the Conservative MPs in this House when it comes to defending Albertans and making sure they have a dignified retirement? They are silent on CPP. They are silent on defending Albertans. They have been muzzled by their leader, and they are not standing up for Albertans despite Danielle Smith's disastrous attempt to pull the Canadians out of the CPP. The Conservatives of nowhere. We're here for...
Colleagues, it's been pointed out to me on several occasions that question periods should be 45 minutes long. If we take up time from here, that means that questions get dropped. So let's not do that. Let's try to keep ourselves to time by respecting those who have the floor. I'm certain everybody would like to hear the question from the member from Tobic-Mataquac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you where Albertan MPs are. They're standing up for their constituents and voting non-confidence in this government that needs to be replaced. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, upwards of 50 active military families are using the food bank, and I just visited one in Oromocto, New Brunswick. 50 families who are serving at Base Gagetown, Canada's largest military base. This is an absolute disgrace and completely unacceptable. Now they're adding insult to injury by hiking their punitive, ineffective, and useless carbon tax. When will they finally listen to Canadians and show some respect to our nation's finest and
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I really find it quite rich coming from the member opposite, from Tobic-Mataquac, when they voted against a raise to our hard-working DND employees. You know, I also would like to ask the member, they voted against the increase for ACOA last fall when they stood and we had the all-night morning marathon. I'd love to ask him what he was going to say to the 106 projects that were funded in his riding that he voted against. Trust me, we'll be telling him that we have the backs for small businesses in rural New Brunswick and rural Atlantic Canada.
The Honourable Member from Tobic-Mataquac.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to tell them that I was voting non-confidence in this government that needs to be replaced. This government has caused the inflationary crisis through reckless spending, and now they're hiking a carbon tax by 23% on gas, heat, and food on April 1st. If they really cared about Canadians, especially those who sacrifice so much in service to our country, they would listen to the well over 70% of Canadians who are demanding them to get off their backs and axe the tax.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there is so much shouting today that I can forgive the member opposite for not hearing earlier today the good news for Canadians, which is thanks to the hard work of Canadians, and it has been a challenging time, inflation in February is back to the Bank of Canada's target range. And that followed the numbers for January. inflation back to the Bank of Canada's target range. This is good news for Canadians who have been through a hard time. We support Canada and Canadians. All they want to do is cut, cut, cut.
Bravo. The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Edmontonians are experiencing a double housing crisis. Rent is increasing at the fastest pace in the country, all while we're seeing the lowest vacancy rates we've had in a decade. The Conservative slogans won't build affordable homes, and the Liberals aren't fixing the problem they've created. The NDP's Protecting Renters Fund would help save affordable homes and give renters the hope they need. Will the Liberals commit to including this fund in the budget so Edmontonians don't go houseless?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructures and Community.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question and for his advocacy. I had the opportunity to be in Edmonton recently to meet with the mayor and the provincial minister in Alberta, as well as my colleague, the member for Edmonton Centre. We are working hard to advance additional funding to support community-based organizations that support Canadians who are living without a roof over their head. We also very recently had the opportunity to share an agreement with $175 million behind it that will build thousands of homes in Edmonton, including more rentals, which will help reduce the cost of rent and continue to support people who are looking to find a place to live. There is no silver bullet to the housing crisis, but we will pull every lever at our disposal to help solve it by working together with Edmonton.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
The European Union states that Netanyahu is using deliberate starvation of children in Gaza as a weapon of war. Human rights groups have spoken out against targeting of journalists, civilians, hospitals, aid workers, and the UN has called out for Canada for complicity in this because we provide the military weapons to Israel. Last night, Parliament called for an end to military aid to Netanyahu's government, and yet numerous military supply deals are still in the works. So will the minister respect Parliament and tell us whether or not deals like the guns from Colt and Kitchener and armed vehicles from Rochelle and Brampton will be sent to Israel, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to begin by saying that yesterday for me was the day I was very proud to be a parliamentarian. In this House, we came together, 4 to 5 parties, to find a workable solution, to find a Canadian position that Canadians could be comfortable with. We will continue to advocate for a ceasefire. We will continue to not sell arms as we have promised and continue to make sure that we bring hostages back to where they belong in their homes. We will continue to do that. I invite the Conservatives to be as engaged in this as we are.
The honourable member from Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, we all recognize the crucial importance of accessible, high-quality child care for families in the Northwest Territories. With the increase of cost of living, accessible daycare is vital. Families in my riding and across the North have been eager to see this plan built out. To the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, what's being done for the Northwest Territories and for Northerners more broadly?
Good. The Honourable Minister for Families.
I met with Jude from the Yellowknife Daycare Center, Jennifer at Aurora College, and many others who were able to share with me firsthand the impact of our Canada-wide system on making life more affordable. As of April 1st, families in Northwest Territories will see their child care fees reduced to an average of $10 a day, saving them up to $9,000 each year per child. This is meaningful savings, Mr. Speaker, each and every month for the moms and dads in Northwest Territories to put towards the essentials that their families need.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. They're starving. That's how they are. That's the explanation of the food bank owner in Montreal. People are waiting in lines up. There was pushing because there wasn't enough food. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, food banks are overcrowded because food costs too much. What is the Prime Minister doing? Raising the carbon tax on April 1st with the support of the Bloc. It costs a lot to block, Mr. Speaker. When will they cancel the 23% increase in the tax slated for April 1st? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. The survival of our planet is at stake. I cannot ignore this climate emergency and continue to look my two sons in the eyes. I would like to quote Premier Legault. He's proud of Quebec's carbon capture system. It's a Quebec system, and Quebecers are proud of it. The Conservatives want to demolish it. We will not allow this. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the survival of Quebec families and a growing number of workers is at stake right now because food costs too much. Food costs too much. Why? Imagine Quebec imports food from the rest of Canada. Farmers that grow food pay the carbon tax. The food processors pay the carbon tax. Truckers who transport this food pay the carbon tax. And guess what? Who pays the end bill? Quebec families, Mr. Speaker. Carbon tax that the Liberal Bloc wants to increase costs Quebecers a lot too. When will they end this craziness? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives are playing with words, we have learned that the UN has just said that 2024 will be the hottest year in history. And what we hear from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, is to do nothing. The planet is sounding the alarm, and that is why on this side of the House we're going to continue to invest to fight climate change. We're going to continue to invest in Canadian families, and Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in this despite the fact that the Conservatives want to ignore climate change in this country. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years of this Liberal government, more and more Canadians are using food banks. People are so hungry that tension is mounting in food bank lines. So much so that the police have to intervene to restore order during food distribution. The Liberal government, supported by the Bloc, is going to raise, once again, the carbon tax on April 1st. It's not an April Fool's joke. It costs a lot to vote Bloc. Apart from making Quebecers suffer even more, what's the Bloc for? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I think there are a lot of people who are watching us at home and just can't believe how much disinformation from the Conservatives taking place. It seems to be limitless. The member just asked a question, and they voted in favor of the carbon price in Quebec. They were part of a government that was a North American leader that was under their climate-denying leader. They've changed their minds, and they've denied all their principles. This is unacceptable. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. I would ask him to read our leader's speech when he came to Quebec during the Conservative Convention. Inflation has already reached devastating levels, creating a cost of living not seen in 40 years. Sorry, colleagues. I would like to ask members to please stop speaking so we can hear the question. I would ask the member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis to start again, please. Mr. Speaker, inflation has already reached devastating levels, a level we haven't seen in 40 years. People in Canada are now unable to feed themselves. It's shameful, but the Bloc proudly supports the 23% increase in carbon tax. It's already too expensive to feed ourselves, but it'll be even more expensive to vote Bloc. Can the government show some compassion and cancel its new carbon tax hike slated for April 1st? The Honourable Minister of Transportation. Mr. Speaker, Quebec's speech, is it that speech or where the leader of the opposition attacked the mayor of Montreal, the Quebec City mayor? Or was it the speech where he said that climate change didn't exist and the Conservatives voted? Or was it the speech where he said that he was going to turn his back on families, seniors, young people, students? Or he said he would cut almost everything? Remind me, which speech are you talking about? Or perhaps it was all this in the same speech that was said in Quebec City. The honourable member for Saint Jean. The federal government's unilateral increase in Quebec's immigration targets is a historic loss of sovereignty for Quebec. When Quebec sets its targets at 50,000, it's 50,000, not 60 or 70,000. If, once the thresholds have been set, the minister wanted to increase family reunification, he should have collaborated with Quebec. For example, he could have finally proposed to lighten Quebec's load with regard to asylum seekers, but he never did. He wanted to force Quebec to increase its targets, whether it wanted to or not. When will we see a collaborative approach instead of a condescending tone? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, I asked the member for Belle-Île about the Canada-Quebec Accord. I should have been more precise. I would just ask them to read Article 13 for more clarification. Clearly, there is collaboration that is very intense with Quebec. We all have our responsibilities to take, and I will continue to work with Minister Fréchette on our common priorities. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Saint Jean. Clearly, no one is against family reunification. We're just against the imposition of irresponsible federal policies on Quebec. If the minister wanted to, he would have negotiated compromises. But let's look at his record. He's forcibly increasing Quebec's immigration targets. He's largely responsible for the record increase in temporary immigration. He's also responsible for the inordinate number of asylum seekers Quebec is taking in without properly distributing them. In all three categories, Ottawa is unilaterally increasing immigration to Quebec with no regard for our reception ability or additional funding. Is this planned or is it a loss of control? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, imagine you're a doctor and we tell you to take in 10 patients and they send you 20. This is ridiculous, and this is the situation Quebec families are experiencing. What I hear from the Bloc is disdain for Quebec families. When will they, when the Quebecers have and Canadians have family abroad and they're trying to be reunited with them, it tears them apart. So we're trying to work in their favour. Thank you.
Honourable member from Mission Mascouche, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. When the carbon tax was announced, small businesses were promised a hefty rebate. The government is now sitting on $2.5 billion in collected revenues, while insolvency skyrocket and businesses suffer under higher taxes and inflation. Wow. As the Prime Minister broke his promise on the carbon tax rebate, why won't he simply spike the hike, axe the tax, and give small businesses their money back?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the MP who just spoke is a member of Parliament for BC. British Columbia is rightly proud of its place as a leader in Canada and the world in putting a price on pollution since 2008. This is a provincial system that the people of BC support. Exactly. So either the Conservative Party is ignorant of this or disrespects the people of BC. When it comes to small businesses, that money will be going back to small businesses very soon.
The Honourable Member from Mission Mascouche, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just small businesses that have been betrayed by this government on the carbon tax. First Nations and Métis communities are owed over $1 billion in promised rebates. In what seems like a sick April Fool's joke, remote and rural communities will see the cost of the carbon tax increase by 23% on April 1st. This means higher costs to operate schools, band offices, and businesses. So I'll ask again, when will this government spike the hike, axe the tax, and give remote and rural Indigenous communities and Métis communities their money back?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
That's a sad question.
Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for that MP from British Columbia, but I am really disappointed that he seems entirely ignorant of how the price on pollution works in BC. There is no federal backstop in BC. There is no federal backstop on BC small businesses, on the people of BC. BC has an exceptional system pricing pollution, which the province has had in place since 2008. The people of BC are proud of it, and they should be.
honourable member from North Okanagan-Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, $100,000 is not chicken feed because Richard, a farmer in the Shuswap, paid that out in carbon tax to run his farm instead of buying feed to raise chickens and put food on Canadians' tables. Now, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister wants to raise the carbon tax by 23% as part of his plan to quadruple it. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will he spike the hike, axe the tax, let farmers grow the food so that Canadians can afford to put food on the table?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be part of a government that understands climate change is real and understands the impact that it's having on farmers from coast to coast to coast. I've seen firsthand as I've traveled the impact of hurricanes, the impact of drought. All that has a cost on our farmers. I'm proud to be part of a government that is fighting climate change so my little granddaughter can say, Nanny, you tried to make a difference, because climate change is real and it is impacting everyone.
The Honourable Hands. Order. I'll invite the Honourable. I'll invite all members, please. There seems to be great enthusiasm to hear from the Honourable Member. The Honourable Member from King's Hands from the top.
Speaker, I'm glad the Tories stood up. They might not like the question, though, because the member from Carleton talks about farmers in King's Hands, but he actually stands in their way. He will not allow Bill 234 to come to this House to actually be voted on. And so I called on the member of Carleton to actually do that to support farmers. But my question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister from Nova Scotia. Can he tell this House, and indeed Nova Scotians, the work that we've done to adjust the federal backstop to support rural Canadians, and including the programs we put in place on affordability around home heating and heat pumps, contrary to those guys across the way?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, over the past year and a half in our home province of Nova Scotia, we have felt the impacts of climate change more than any other part of the country, with wildfires, Hurricane Fiona, floods in the Honourable Member's riding. He has been a staunch advocate for rural communities and for the agricultural sector every step of the way. Because of his advocacy, we have doubled the rural rebate that households in Nova Scotia receive. Because of his advocacy, we are helping cover the cost of heat pumps that is saving between $1,500 and $4,700 a year. And because of his advocacy, the provincial government is retreating on a policy that would impact the wine growers in his region. I am proud to stand alongside him today and will be for years.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
8 years of this NDP Liberal government's soft on crime policies, more and more Canadians are becoming victims to violent crime right across the country. The Toronto Star reports that carjackings have more than doubled so far in 2024, and break-in entries for the purpose of car thefts have already exceeded the total number of all of last year. Canadians are not only concerned about their private property, but also the safety of their families. And I met some of these families in Brampton this weekend, Mr. Speaker, and they want to know, when will this Prime Minister drop his soft on crime policies and protect Canadians from real violent crime?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government is always focused on protecting Canadians from crime.
Absolutely.
That's why we're working with police forces, municipal authorities, and provincial governments to do exactly everything we need to do to crack down on this increasingly violent criminal activity. I've had conversations with the Premier of Ontario, with police chiefs across the country. The RCMP are working in collaboration with their partners in these jurisdictions. The Canadian Border Services Agency sees 68 vehicles at the Port of Montreal this week alone. And Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do everything we need to do to keep Canadians safe. Excellent.
Exactly.
The honourable member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, what they did do is bring in Bill C5 and 75 that allows these same criminals to quickly get bail and be out on the street, sometimes on the same day. As a result, small businesses across the country are not only dealing with the higher taxes like the carbon tax that the Liberals have brought forward, but now are having to pay for extra security to protect their businesses and their families from property theft, organized crime, extortion, shootings, arson. This is a new reality for businesses and families in Canada after 8 years of this Prime Minister. He's not the worst. He's not worth the cost, corruption, or crime, Mr. Speaker. When will it end?
The Honourable Minister for Justice and the Procureur Général du Canada.
I respect that member opposite, but what I respect most of all is that he actually wasn't here when we were voting on Bill C-75. That piece of legislation actually enhanced the penalties on summary conviction for auto theft, something that most of his colleagues voted against. He wasn't here, so I'll excuse him on that one. On the issue of mandatory minimum penalties, there's a guy named Ben Perrin. He might remember that individual. He used to be the league advisor to a guy named Stephen Harper. Ben Perrin has been on the record as saying that mandatory minimum penalties were a gross error, a miscarriage of justice, and perpetuate systemic racism. That's why we reversed them. I wish these guys would get on board.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Haut-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, car thefts have almost doubled in Toronto on last year, and 2024 has just begun. And where have the stolen vehicles gone? The Port of Montreal. I applaud the efforts of the Sûreté du Québec in February, but the federal government must do more. That's why our leader has proposed amending the criminal code to bring back tougher penalties for car thieves and provide the necessary resources to the ports to help them stop the crime. Does the Liberal government realize their strategy isn't working on car theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, in terms of crime in my community and car thefts, well, we are prioritizing this. The investments we did at the Port of Montreal, it affects 28 million, 121 million for police assistance, and another 15 million to help border services operate at the border. Our investments are the action we need to fight this extremely important issue and to promote security in our communities. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Speaker, I believe that no one in this country should ever spend their days in pain because they cannot afford to see a dentist. Oral health is health. I hear from seniors in Dartmouth Cole Harbour that the new Canadian Dental Care Plan is going to make a real difference in their quality of life. Yet the Conservatives just don't care. They voted against dental care for Canadians, and we know that Conservatives always choose cuts over care. Can the Minister of Citizen Services please let Canadians know how many people have applied for the program and how many seniors will lose their dental coverage if the Conservatives get their way?
The Honourable Minister for Citizen Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very happy to advise my colleague that thanks to his efforts, more than 1.5 million Canadians have successfully enrolled in our dental care program. Bravo. Today, those 70 and older can apply, and children and people with disabilities can apply starting in June. In total, we expect 9 million Canadians to benefit. I do not understand why Conservatives want to take dental care away from more than 1 in 5 Canadians. But if we all work together, Canadians can make sure that they never have that opportunity.
Before I pass the floor to the Honourable Member from Victoria, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Perth Wellington, please, who is an experienced member, to not shout out his comments and allow members who have the floor to respond. Sorry, my apologies. My apologies. Both are very respected members. The Honourable Member from Wellington Halton Hills, I should have said. The Honourable Member from Victoria now has the floor.
It's like an elephant sitting on my chest. That's how a child in Edmonton describes the air quality right now. Canada currently has the worst air quality in North America. Our kids are breathing in harmful toxins, and it's only going to get worse with this year's wildfire season. But the Liberals are acting like it's business as usual, breaking climate promises while handing out billions to Canada's biggest polluters. And the Conservatives can't even agree whether climate change is real. Will the Liberals stop putting the interests of oil and gas CEOs over the health and safety of our children?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. In fact, we are doing exactly that. We're the first country, the only country in the G20 to have phased out fossil fuel subsidies, 2 years ahead of everyone else. We're the only country that has committed to eliminate public financing for fossil fuel subsidies. We have the best performance of all G7 countries in terms of greenhouse gas reduction between 2019 and 2021. We are working to fight climate change. We are working to improve air quality all across the country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend, Flair canceled one of its flights back to Canada and left over 100 passengers stranded in another country. No communication with them, no food provided, no rebooking on other airlines. They had to find their own way back to this country. Now, if this sounds like deja vu, it's because the exact same thing happened 2 years ago, and the Liberals promised to stand up to the big airline CEOs. So to the Minister, will he tell these passengers why his supposedly new and improved air passenger rights let them down so badly?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we will always stand up for Canadians and always stand up for passengers' rights, Mr. Speaker. There was nothing before we came in. Now we're in touch with Flair, we're in touch with our other airline companies, Mr. Speaker, to see what we can do, but we'll always side with our air passengers.
And so brings to an end of question period. Orders of the day.
Orders of the day, ordre du jour, ordre émanant du gouvernement, travaux des subsides.